Imagine a chemical so profoundly toxic that a single teaspoon of its raw form could contaminate an entire community. Now imagine pumping millions of tons of that very chemical directly into the atmosphere, allowing it to settle in the lungs of every child, adult, and living creature on Earth. For over half a century, this wasn't a dystopian nightmare. It was the global standard for fuel. This is the story of tetraethyl lead, or leaded petrol, an invention hailed as a miracle of modern engineering, which became arguably the most pervasive environmental crime in human history. To understand why we poisoned our skies, we must first look at the problem it solved. In the early 20th century, the booming automotive industry hit a literal roadblock: engine knocking. When early fuels were compressed inside high-performance engines, they ignited prematurely. This didn't just cause a horrific metallic rattling sound, it actively blew engines apart. Enter General Motors and a brilliant, charismatic mechanical engineer turned chemist named Thomas Midgley Jr. in December 1921. After testing thousands of compounds, Midgley discovered that adding just a fraction of a percent of tetraethyl lead tel to gasoline instantly cured the knock. It allowed engines to run smoothly, boost their horsepower, and operate with unprecedented efficiency. The commercial importance of this invention cannot be overstated. It quite literally unlocked the true potential of the internal combustion engine, paving the way for the high-speed, long-distance road networks that defined the 20th century. But there was a catch. The inventors knew lead was a deadly neurotoxin. In fact, General Motors deliberately omitted the word lead from their branding, choosing instead to market it under the innocent-sounding name, ethyl. The danger wasn't a slow burn, it was immediate. In 1924, at a newly opened Standard Oil refinery in Bayway, New Jersey, workers manufacturing tel began acting erratically. They suffered from hallucinations, severe paranoia, and violent convulsions. 5 workers died in quick succession. The press dubbed the facility the House of Butterflies, because the dying men were frantically swatting at imaginary insects. A contemporary report in the New York Times detailed how one worker, completely stripped of his sanity, jumped from a laboratory window. Midgley himself had to take a secret leave of absence to recover from lead poisoning. Yet, under intense pressure from oil conglomerates, the public was assured that the fuel was entirely safe once diluted in petrol. The industry successfully lobbied governments, and by the 1930s, leaded petrol was pumping out of almost every station across the globe. But as the decades rolled on, the invisible cost of this miracle fuel began to surface. Lead does not break down. Every gram pumped out of an exhaust pipe settled into the soil, the dust, and the air. Decades later, science would finally catch up to the scale of the damage. A seminal long-term study published in the Lancet by researchers at Duke University followed over 1,000 individuals born in the 1970s. The findings were staggering. Children who grew up during the peak era of leaded petrol exposure suffered a measurable permanent drop in their IQ. The research concluded that millions of people worldwide lost an average of 3 to 5 IQ points solely due to automotive lead exhaust. Even more chilling is the societal impact. Economists and criminologists, notably outlined in landmark papers by researcher Rick Nevin, identified a striking near-identical correlation between atmospheric lead levels and violent crime rates. Because lead severely damages the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for impulse control and emotional regulation, the peak of global lead exposure in the 1970s perfectly predicted the massive spike in global violent crime 20 years later, just as that generation reached adulthood. Environmentally, the impact was catastrophic. A 2022 study assessing global historical soils showed that urban environments near historical highway corridors still contain lead concentrations up to 10 times higher than safe baseline levels. It poisoned ecosystems, accumulated in food chains, and silently degraded the baseline health of entire generations. It took the heroic, decades-long crusade of independent scientists, most notably geochemist Claire Patterson, to fight the corporate entities and prove the toxicity of leaded fuel. Gradually, countries began switching to unleaded alternatives. The battle finally concluded in August 2021, when Algeria became the last country on Earth to officially deplete its stocks, drawing a close to a tragic century of legal poisoning. Tetraethyl lead was undoubtedly a masterpiece of industrial utility. It powered the machinery that built our modern world. Yet, it stands as a stark, timeless warning of what happens when short-term corporate profit and immediate engineering convenience outweigh the long-term well-being of our planet and humanity. If you found this look into history valuable, do subscribe to the Greats of Our Time for more deep dives into the innovations, people, and choices that shaped our world. Until next time.